As of today, there lies a stigma that most animated films are for children, and those that are created often avoids the more tragic themes that we often see in live-action films. Where many of Hollywood's blockbusters dominate the US box office charts, such as Avatar, Titanic, and Jurassic World, many animated films are actually being pushed to the side because of their supposed lack of accommodation for the older audiences. This is not necessarily true. Animation directors such as Hayao Miyazaki and Makoto Shinkai base many of their stories through experiences that many older audiences can relate to, where films such as Howl's Moving Castle, Princess Mononoke, 5 centimeters per second, Garden of Words, The Castle of Cagliostro, and Spirited Away all contain something for someone. Here is a look into animation. What is your favorite film? Go ahead, say it quietly to yourself. The idea of this animation stigma revolves around the culture of modern-day children and adults. If I were to ask a kid what their favorite movie was, it would most likely be an animated film. Yet asking one of you most likely responded with a live-action film. And people don't necessarily grow out of animation, because after all, animated films achieve the same goal in the end as live-action films, to tell a story. But instead I believe they fear the risk of being branded as childish as the films themselves are perceived to be. Look at Pixar's Toy Story series for example. It's an endearing tale of growing up, emphasized by elements such as loneliness and being yourself. It's a story that is well told, relatable, since we are all constantly growing up, and celebrated with remarkable reviews. Yet why is it that when you ask an adult, young or old, Toy Story rarely seems to be an answer? Beyond our inner perception, when looking at most modern animated films, we see in the genre the lack of heavy emphasis on adult-related themes such as horror and vulgarness, and instead, they often revolve around colorful characters and non-violent plots to appeal to their beloved audience. As a result, this idea that animated films' sole purpose is to entertain children becomes a firmly held concept. The stigma is very well alive, but again, not true.
In your films, your characters are always so appealing, and even your villains, your bad guys. Can you talk about sort of as you create a villain, what's your thinking?
悪役を作ると大抵好きになっちゃうんですよね。本当の悪人じゃなくなっちゃうんです。例えばフラッシャー兄弟が作ったスーパーマンの短編がありますけど、ハリウッドの山のすぐちょっと上の方に溶鉱炉を作ってたりするんですよ。溶鉱炉って鉄を溶かすための、そんな設備投資をして努力する悪役は主人公よりも可愛いですよね。どうも悪役の方がその主人公たちよりも勤勉なんです。それから本当に心に穴が開いてしまった悪役を出すと映画全体が本当にすさんだものになりますから、それはやっぱり描きたくないんですね。アニメーターが仕事やってる時見ると笑顔を描いてる時は笑顔になってるんです。それから悪役を描いてる時は大抵嫌な顔して描いてますから、なるべく笑顔の方が長い方が映画としてはいいじゃないか。
At first glance, animation may seem to cater to younger audiences, because we often judge a book by its cover. But if you were to look beyond the quality of the picture, what you get is a brilliant genre of storytelling that we can all understand and relate to. In Miyazaki films, we see the creation of an involving story that, although animated, contains the real that we often see in our everyday lives. The characters depict more realistic features and are driven by Miyazaki's strong connection with the human person. There are no exaggerated movements that other directors incorporate to cheat our interpretation of emotion. But instead, we have a character that possesses human-like characteristics that is not far from our concept of a person. Rather, it is a girl putting on her shoes correctly, a child making a mess of his breakfast, or an old lady sitting down because she's tired. These moments of calm, moments void of superfluous explosions, allows us to relax for a moment and establish connection with the characters that are on the screen. These lulls in a movie allows us to reflect on the characters' experiences within the world and create an attachment between us and them. What animation lacks in reality, Miyazaki makes up for through these moments of relations, and our ability to rate does not solely pertain to the main characters only. In Howl's Moving Castle, a character is not directly categorized as good or evil, but instead, there exists a combination of the two, because in reality, no one is of one nature. Humans, demons, sorcerers, and even witches all demonstrate moments of goodness, selfishness, and folly. In Spirited Away, we see a mean-spirited lady, but at the same time a caring mother. We see a hard worker, but at the same time an individual consumed by greed. Throughout all of Miyazaki's films, we see all these characters not as a far-fetched figment of our imagination, but instead real characters that we, old or young, can connect with throughout his or her journey.
子供は分からなくても分からないままに出会うことが必要で、そのうちに分かるようになるんだということを言ってくれたので、そういう考え方もあるなと。
Beyond our connection to characters, animation proves worthy of being a method of storytelling for all ages. Where live-action films are often restricted to the constraints of the real world, animation allows for a spectrum that accommodates for both the imaginary and the real, where the use of animated characters and environments are used to better create plots, themes, and messages. For example, Howl's Moving Castle is a tale of a young girl trying to reverse a curse planted on her. Princess Mononoke is a story of war between two opposing sides. Spirited Away is about a girl trying to escape a land of fantasy and back to her parents. Children and adults alike can easily interpret the plot, but where children see the film as a fairy tale, adults or those who are capable of interpreting it can find central motives beyond the story, where instead of a tale, we have a story that tells you that being old does not symbolize the end of creativity, a story about the destruction of nature through industrialism, a story about growing up and the hardships that parallels the coming of age, even stories about empowering women to be active leaders in their communities. Miyazaki presents so many strong messages throughout his films that it's impossible to classify these films as being just for kids. Where Miyazaki implements plots behind the story to appeal to wider audiences, Makoto Shinkai produces brilliant works of art, like seriously brilliant works of art, that aims to bring the genre towards the older audiences. And I'm not talking about the various minor details that relate to the more adult aspect of film, but instead the major themes that are present in Shinkai's films. Shinkai's two most popular work, 5 cm per second and Garden of Words, feature plots that younger audiences would be able to understand but not able to fully comprehend the meaning of. In addition, feature some of the most prominent attention to realistic lighting and effects. 5 cm per second and Garden of Words are both stories about falling in love, a common motif found in all aspects of film that we see. However, for 5 cm per second, it is a story of anguish and longing, following the life of Takaki Tono, his relationship to Akari Shinohara, and the growing distance between them. Contrary to the idealized depiction of love and the happily ever afters one comes to expect from traditional romantic fiction, Shinkai subverts typical romantic norms in favor of a more realistic portrayal of love and relationships. Shinkai comments on the naivety of idealized romance and the notion that a couple will surmount whatever obstacle they encounter, and blends the line of dream and reality in order to create a painfully conflicted and somber reflection. Similarly, Garden of Words is a tale of challenging the norm and doing what your heart desires. Takako Akizuki, a 15-year-old student, wants to become a shoemaker. Despite everyone's negative opinion of his craft, he continues to pursue his career. And if that's not odd enough, he goes on to fall in love with a much older woman. And although it's against the norms of society, he defies the established expectations and chases after his love. These plots are predominantly focused on older audiences, and would confuse, if not bore, younger audiences. Shinkai is introducing animation as not just child's entertainment, but as a meaningful and insightful story. These films are just some of the many works of animation out there that defies the stigma of animation being just for children. Although the genre depicts its characters and environment as cartoony, the film has a plethora of relatable characters that allows for a connection with a wide range of audiences. The animated aspect of film also allows for a telling of story that pertains to the young and the old. There even exist animated films that aim to push the genre forward towards a less accommodated group of spectators. Animation is not just for children, it's for everyone.